All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Whelan. I'm Chief Community Officer at Lionsider. We have friends jumping in. I'm hanging out with my buddies Cecilia Ziniti and Alexandra Sepulveda. We are going to have a conversation about AI and contracts today. As you come into the room, I'm going to ask you to do what we always do. Tell us how international this audience is by jumping over in the chat, letting us know where in the world you are coming from. If you look down at the bottom on the features on Zoom, you'll see one that says chat. Hit that. Tell us where you're coming from. While you're doing that, I'm going to just give a couple of details on how we're running this webinar, and then we'll move over to the conversation. So as you see, we have the chat feature. Looking down at the bottom, we're going to use two principal features, the chat feature and the Q&A feature. For the chat, its principal purpose is to allow you all to talk to each other. So Cecilia is going to ask questions like, hey, what would you guys do with this? If you saw language like this, how would you beat this up? Jump over to the chat, beat it up. Let people know how you would deal with things in your either your firm or your office, your legal department, in your AI or in your in-house role. How are you all using AI? Have those conversations over in the chat. There's also a Q&A feature, and we'll use the Q&A for you to ask actual questions to Cecilia and Alexandra. If you drop those in there, they'll pile up and I'll have them saved later. You can also thumb up the questions that other people have asked so that we know this is a more popular question. There are a lot of people with that question. So we'll save some time at the end for Q&A. Make sure you use both the chat feature for conversations with each other and Q&A for conversations with the guests here today. Before the questions are asked, yes, there will be slides sent to you. We're going to send you the recording of this. You'll be able to get all the details. So take some notes if you want to, but keep them broad. You'll be able to study this later. And to know there is not CLE credit or whatever your CPD, is that what it's called in Canada? No credit for things like that. Part of being a global company is it is really hard to get credit for all the things. If you have self-study credit in your jurisdiction and you need us to help facilitate that, just email me. I'm at mike@lionsider.com and I'll help facilitate that. All right. So that is my whole spiel, I think, for today. We are having a conversation with Cecilia Ziniti of GCAI. She is a self-declared and validated AI expert. And then we've got Alexandra Sepulveda, who has been in practice in a firm, also in-house, and now teaches about commercial contracts and processes around that. So that is the whole intro. Cecilia, I'm going to turn the time over to you. Let's get going.
Thank you, Mike. It's really great to be here with Law Insider. I have been a fan of Mike's for a number of years. I can't promise his level of dad jokes, but I can do some mom jokes and I can do some serious AI. So in the last few years, I've gotten enamored with it, and then asked my friend Alexandra Sepulveda to join us today because we're going to deep dive on AI for contracts. Her cred in the contract space is serious cred. She's worked for some amazing companies. She's worked for Uber and others where literally, we were prepping for this class and the seminar, and I asked her for her total contracts count over the years, and she guesstimated it might be around 5,000. So there is not a limitation of liability provision variant that she has not seen. So when we dive into that, we're going to get some really nice kind of human plus AI stuff. One quick thing, we do have a theme for this, which is human versus AI. But I'm going to give you a little spoiler, which is that really the good stuff gets to human plus AI. So that's going to be some of the goals of today. All right, so exploring practical uses for AI and contracting, that's our kind of like very serious title, but our like actual like more, I guess, practical and fun title is that we're going to ride a bike. And you're like, lady, what are you talking about, ride a bike? Okay, when you are learning to ride a bike, I know this because I just taught my 4-year-old, you can visit Schwinn.com, you can go to CLEs about bikes, you can read biking experts, you can pick out helmets, but really the way to learn to ride a bike is to do it. And so this CLE, it's going to be, or this session, will be a little bit different from other sessions you might have seen, where I really want you all to interact, to the point that I went and created like a code and a special, usually we're invite only at GCAI, but I created, you can go to getgc.ai/law insider and create an account and actually use AI as we speak. If your company forbids it, I'm sorry, too bad, but maybe this session will be motivation for you to see what's possible, because I really genuinely believe, like, bet my career on it, that law is going to be different, and how we do commercial contracts in particular is going to be very different with AI. We're going to do a quick intro. I'm going to give you some tips, some pro tips, like this, like literally Law Insider. You're going to get insider knowledge on how AI works. Going to weave in that expert Alexandra on commercial contracts to give that perspective of, like, what does a human add to this that AI can't? How does a human work with AI to actually respond to mark up a contract or to negotiate a provision or to decide how aggressive to be, right? And then we're gonna actually do the throwdown, right? So we have a theme there. I think it's a fun one. It's super topical to what people have been talking about. It was the terms of use heard around the world was a term I heard. So we're gonna see what happens there. And then we're actually gonna practice prompting. So that's kind of the agenda for today. So I invite you to ride a bike. I use a lot of metaphors, but my metaphor for this is giving a trained lawyer like you all, especially someone who's enthusiastic about contracts, AI is like giving an elite marathon runner a bike, where you're already really fast, right? You can negotiate, you can turn contracts, you can use Law Insider to pull provisions with the best of them. But if you give such a marathon runner a bicycle, well, they're also an elite athlete and they can go faster, they can do different things. And so that's the metaphor for the day. All right. Okay. So quick question. Did anybody hear what LinkedIn did last week? Was anybody on LinkedIn and hear anything about what happened? Drop in the chat if you're familiar with maybe a contract that LinkedIn might have revised. No. All right. We got a couple of no's. Anybody know what happened?
Some of these people are apparently not as terminally online as we are.
Yes, that is what happened. So I'm getting a lot of no's. Basically, LinkedIn updated their terms of use, their user agreement. And in their user agreement, they basically did a quiet update. And Alexandra, tell us what they did.
I mean, it was kind of shocking, I have to be honest, but in a very silent update, they said that they can use anything that you post on LinkedIn to train up their generative AI product, which means that my very silly commercial contracting beach volleyball article is now going to train up some LinkedIn product. But yeah, it was shocking. It was shocking.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then, they tried to do it quietly. And because they've got people in their LinkedIn audience like us that really look at terms of use, people noticed, right? And so everyone was like, oh my gosh, go to this opt-out setting. The actual agreement, here's what LinkedIn says. They say, when it comes to using your data, we offer an opt-out setting. Okay, cool. And then the contract continues. At this time, we're not enabling training for Gen AI on member data from the EEA, Switzerland, and the UK, and will not provide the setting there. So if you're in one of those places, you're good. The rest of us, okay, you got to turn off the setting or you're training the AI. But what that question sparked for me, besides excitement that people were getting really excited about privacy, commercial contracts, IP licensing, AI, all these things that are passions of mine, what that made me think of is like, okay, how many of us have business stakeholders or clients that are like, oh, hey, what's going on with LinkedIn? Fix that. We spend a lot of money on LinkedIn, we recruit people, whatever, figure that out. So you can imagine, or maybe you don't have to imagine because it happened to you, but your CEO or somebody sends you an email, it's like, hey, why don't you go look at the LinkedIn agreement and figure out what's going on? Like, disable this for us. And by the way, we're up for renegotiation. Anyway, please go ahead and fix this. So that's our hypo. But what about businesses using LinkedIn? What agreement applies? We've got the LinkedIn subscription agreement, which again, not the same agreement as the end user agreement. Slightly confusing, but of course, those of us who do this for a living, like we know, okay, there's usually the end user terms, the EULA, you can see hundreds of those in the clause banks, or, the actual equivalent of an MSA, which LinkedIn seems to be calling their LSA. So our theme for today, first I'm gonna give you some prompt tips, but then we're gonna dive in on this LinkedIn subscription agreement. We're gonna apply like basically basic contracting issue spotting, as well as a review of individual provisions. And we're gonna see how that goes with AI, right? So like, obviously you can do it by hand. You know, you probably marked up a subscription agreement hundreds of times in your career, or at least you've been exposed to them. You've certainly accepted hundreds of MSAs in your career, or just your life. So we're going to use that as our base. So that's our theme. And by the way, you know, when you've got stakeholders getting excited about contracts, like you seize that moment and you embrace your expertise. All right. So that's the theme. Can AI help us negotiate with a deal? And then who's going to win? And I already gave you guys my spoiler because I'm terrible at keeping secrets, which is that we're going to win together. All right. But first, your pro tips so that we're sure that you win with AI. All right. So pro tip number 1, treat AI like a smart, fast, overeager college intern who has read the entire internet. All right. 5 parts to that metaphor, or 4 parts to that metaphor, each has meaning. It's super smart. You all already read it, passed the US New York bar exam, which is a hard one, the 90th percentile. It's crazy fast. You know, it's a computer. I'm not gonna believe it at that point, but the point is we're gonna give it that LinkedIn subscription agreement and it'll read it, you know, faster. Even if you read at a pretty human, you know, pretty fast pace, 300 words a minute, you can take a test online if you're competitive. Hint, hint, lawyers are competitive. But anyways, even assuming you're a fast reader, you know, you're not going to be as fast as AI. But you will be very fast if you add AI to your practice. All right. And then overeager college intern. Anybody heard of hallucinations? Anybody know what that is? Alexandra, what do you think of when you think of AI hallucination?
You know, honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is that Zoom recording heard around the world where that gentleman had a cat over his face and he couldn't figure out how to turn off the filter. I know that's not an AI hallucination, but when you said it, that was the first thing that comes to mind. Actual
No,
AI hallucination.
I love that. I
Right?
rewatched the video. I think I rewatched it 100 times.
No, but an actual AI hallucination is AI thinking that it has the answer when it actually doesn't. From my
That's exactly right. And, you know, and this is actually, there's an implication of that for working with AI. So Mike's got a question in the chat. If you want to let him know what AI tools are you using for work, are you using ChatGPT, Copilot, nothing, etc. But yeah, exactly. Olivia's right. So sometimes AI make things up, but it's much less likely to make things up if you point it at a specific thing, right? It wants to make you happy. And so if you tell it, there's a very funny example that we'll go into quick before we go into the contract stuff, where this AI researcher named Ethan Mollick, he had an example where he gave the AI the book, All Quiet on the Western Front. And he said, come back to me, AI, with something that, with a version of this book that does not talk about squid. And you're like, what? The original book doesn't talk about squid. But he sort of badgered the AI and he's like, no, take all the squid out. And eventually the AI gives in. It starts to hallucinate. And it's like, okay, in the beaches of Normandy, in which there were no cephalopods, blah, blah, blah. And so the idea is that from a commercial contracting standpoint, if you tell the AI to remove a provision that's not there, or you tell the AI to add a case and no such case exists, it will sometimes be overeager and want to make you happy and make things up. All right, great. All right, so then it's an overeager college intern that's read the internet. This is the AI training point that we got to. All right, so great JNI use cases that we can do with contracts. We're going to home in on a couple of these. AI can distill what you do. It can review what you do. It can work with some drafting. It can help with research. We're going to focus mostly on the first 3, but you can use AI for all of those things. All right, final pro tip before we dive in. Give AI context. So exactly like Irina in the chat mentioned, is like AI does better, just like a human intern, when you tell it what you're working with, right? So if you're doing a commercial contract thing with AI and you say, give me a termination provision, all of you know there are 1,000 varieties of termination provisions doing different things. Are we terminating for convenience? Are we terminating for breach? What's going on? And so I think it's much better to say, I'm working on a contract for a graphic designer for our company's website. We want to be able to assess the designer's work and terminate the contract within 30 days, no penalty if we don't like the design. So this is saying this is termination basically for convenience, but with an extra bit, which is really for performance. And then you tell the AI, give me 3 alternative options. So that first prompt, no good. Second prompt, good. And we're gonna work on that together with this LinkedIn contract. All right, second example, just real quick to get the juices flowing for you all. A weak prompt, upload a contract, review this contract. What are you reviewing it for, right? A good intern is gonna be like, no, tell me, what do you want me to look at? This second example, you're gonna see that me and Alexandra are gonna go in and use one more like this. You tell the company you tell the AI what company you're working for, right? Are you a construction services provider in Toronto, or are you a global software company out of Hyderabad? You know, whatever it is that is relevant to your company, tell the AI that. It's just like a real human. AI will do better if it knows what you're trying to do. So in the second example, we're saying review this MSA for which we are the customer. I'd like you to consider the following. A, limitation of liability. B, termination. C, payment terms. D, choice of law. E, indemnity. So I've given the AI 2, 3, 4, 5 things to think about. And AI will be very diligent, just like that intern. It'll go through and look for those 5 things. So that's probably, if you remember, one prompt tip for the day, one takeaway for commercial contracts in AI is be very specific and treat it like an intern. All right, now I've done the pedagogy thing. I've said what the concepts are. Let's go in and actually do the concepts and be super practical about using AI here for contracts. And then, by the way, I did a couple extra things here in the prompt. I said for each of those 5 things, please provide the language from the contract, your analysis of its risk, and a recommendation. Put your answers in a table format. All right, so let's go in and first of all, any questions on that? Any good experiences, bad experiences with AI? World War II. Yeah, you were right. That's a good. Frederick's with a history check. All right, so let's dive in. Okay, so let's do a contract teardown of the LinkedIn subscription agreement. You versus AI. So let's take a look. I'm gonna pull off my screen share here, and I'm gonna open up this LinkedIn subscription agreement. I will drop it in the chat as well. Here it is. So we did a little bit of the cooking show thing before we started this webinar. I pulled up the agreement and I figured out that if you are a business on LinkedIn, this is the agreement that applies to you. So I just dropped that in the chat. All right. So Alexandra, what do we, if you were starting this fresh without AI, and you had been asked to review this, what's your process? How do you go from kind of 0 to 1 when you get a new contract?
Well, the first thing that I do is I read the whole thing from beginning to end, and I probably read it a couple of times. And then once I do that, I start to zoom in on the things that I know that are going to be issues for the company that I work with, right? Every company has standards for what they will and will not agree to in a commercial agreement. And so those are going to center around, what is it that we're buying? Is that laid out clearly? What's the indemnification provision, limitation of liability, and the termination provisions?
All right, those are the biggies. So it sounds like you get like kind of the gestalt of the contract. And then from there, you're like, okay, there's some biggies that I know that are going to be things that I need to drill down on. Fair?
That's fair. And I think a lot of times you have to do a first pass to get the sense of what even is this thing. Because a lot of times you can't rely on your business people to tell you. They'll just say like, hey, we got to sign this thing by the end of the week. Can you please take a look?
Yeah. Anybody have that experience? Yeah, drop in the chat. Give us some emoji reacts. All right, good stuff. Okay, so here we are in the LinkedIn. Yes, exactly. Abdul is feeling it this Friday. All right, Vivian, same thing. So you get this contract and you're like, what even is this? It's funny because I was working on an AI prompt for a system prompt for AI and thinking I should have a WTF prompt. It's like literally like, what the heck is this contract? But then I thought, let's keep it profesh. And so then I called it explain this to me or something like that. But anyways, all right, here we are with this agreement. So we know Alexandra's process. What is AI going to do with this? So let's take a look. So again, we did the cooking show thing. I'm going to show you how to do this with AI. So here we are in kind of the main home screen of GCAI, and it is a chatbot format or a chat format, very similar to ChatGPT, but with some key differences, right? So we've actually got you can tell the AI what company you work for, so that it knows, again, you're working out of, a consumer goods company in Indonesia versus you're working at a purely software company versus you're working for a government agency, whatever it is. And so I'm gonna pick a company called Yorko here. That's just a test company for us to use for this. Let's see, there we are. Pick Yorko, and gonna assume that we're reviewing this LinkedIn contract. All right, so we knew what Alexandra was gonna do. Let's do this like overview prompt that we have here. All right, so what are we going to do in the prompt? So I'm going to give you that prompt tip again with specificity. Take the role of legal counsel for the other party for my company's contract attached or linked below. And I've got the link to the LSA. So we're actually going to go out and look at this LinkedIn agreement. It will visit the page. Not every AI will do that. If it doesn't, then you would want to like either upload the contract or you could cut and paste it. So we're going to do that. We're going to try this prompt on a new prompt. Okay. All right. So what does the AI do? Is it going to do what Alexandra does and go read? Let's see. Visiting page. Okay, this is promising. Let's see how it does. All right. Whoops. I went to the wrong window. Sorry about that. Okay. Visiting the page, again, promising. Here are the top 5 issues that should be negotiated, along with the explanations and language giving rise to each. All right, so let's take a look. So, non-refundable payments. The clause stating that purchases are non-cancelable and payments are non-refundable is too rigid. And what is it pointing at? It is pointing at section 1.2. Customers' purchases are non-cancelable and payment for services is non-refundable except as otherwise stated in this LSA. All right, so we gave it a 5-part issue spotter, and it actually did relatively similar to what Alexandra said, right? So Alexandra said limitation of liability was definitely a biggie that she looks at. What else did she mention? She mentioned payments provisions, of course. So we've got a match there. Alexandra told us about indemnity though. So AI did not spot that. That's not great, but we will ask AI to do more here. But let's take a look at this non-refundable payments provision. Section 1.2. Let's pull that up. All right. Customer will pay the fees for the services in accordance with the payment terms. Customers' purchases are non-cancelable and payment for the service is non-refundable except as otherwise stated. Okay, Alexandra, what do we think of that?
I don't love it, right? But you also know as a commercial contracts person that like if you're a smaller company going up against someone that's the size of LinkedIn, you're probably just going to have to advise your business team that this is a risk and that you're probably going to have to take it. If you are someone who spends a lot of money on LinkedIn, then this is probably a conversation with their legal team. But again, like how many of us are in a position of privilege to be able to do that? So you're probably just going to have to accept it.
All right, well, let's riff on Mike's question in the chat and Alexandra's advice, which is good advice, which is, of course, know how much leverage you have. But let's just say let's call ourselves General Motors. General Motors has almost 1 million employees, or even Amazon. Let's say we're Amazon all of a sudden. We've got 2 million employees. And if you just charge, let's say they charge $30 a listing to 1 million employees, let's just say we're spending $60 million on LinkedIn. That's quite conservative. I bet Amazon LinkedIn spend is probably multiples of that. But let's assume we're that and we're negotiating this. What issues do we see with this, folks? Drop in the chat. What would you change about 1.2? Mike, maybe you have some ideas?
Well, I'm not a self-declared contracts expert.
Self or third party declared? Neither.
Yeah, neither.
All
I've
right,
got yeah, y'all make sure that you drop into the chat. If you've ever seen a contract teardown show, we're basically modeling that. So what do you see in here that stands out?
so Annika's got a good idea. She says there might be commercially reasonable termination reasons below. So reading them together or see if they stipulated any exceptions. Okay, yeah, good point, Irene. Anybody else? All right, well, let's move forward. Let's say that we just we're like, look, we can cancel anytime. Let's take a look at the termination provision, actually. So the normal way to do this, or the non-AI way to do this, is we would probably search for termination. All right, termination and subscription. Either party may terminate this LSA if the other party materially breaches and fails to cure in 30 days. Okay, fine. But oh my gosh, look, here is Annika's point. Termination of this LSA or an order form will not relieve customers' obligation to LinkedIn to pay any fees stated in the order form unless it's uncured material breach. So TLDR,
LinkedIn, that's generous.
yeah, oh, exactly. Thank you for saying if you materially breach, then you don't have to pay. Exactly. So any other commercial contracts points so do people like this? Is this a customer friendly provision? Folks, what do we think?
Spoiler alert, it is not.
It's not. Exactly. I know you all know this from all the places that you're dialing in from. We got Frederick, we got Amina, we've got Rob over in we've got Bud in North Carolina. Be safe. But suffice it to say that if you had any leverage at all, you would not accept this. So let's see how AI does. So what does AI recommend in this situation? Non-cancelable, non-refundable, except as otherwise stated. Okay, we did check and it didn't otherwise state. And then look, it homed in on the same provision Annika did. Termination of this LSA or an order form will not relieve the customer's obligation to pay. That was section 5.3. Let's just double check if the AI got that right. Yep, here we are, 5.3. By the way, pro tip for working with AIs, spot check them. I have found ChatGPT, if your alternative is don't use AI at all or use ChatGPT, go ahead and use ChatGPT, but just be aware that it will sometimes, or at a much higher rate, make up section numbers in contracts. And the technical reason for that is that, from my proclaimed AI expert, the technical reason for that is that it tends to abstract a contract to save tokens, to save money. And so it will very frequently paraphrase contracts in a way that GCAI or other more advanced AIs will not do. All right, so let's take a look. So it noticed that, and then we actually asked AI, this is something a lot of people don't think to do with AI, and is a very practical tip to our point of this webinar, is to actually use AI to do the communication. So we actually asked AI to write an email and says, hey, LinkedIn legal team, reaching out to discuss some aspects of the LSA we'd like to negotiate. We appreciate how comprehensive your LSA is, but a couple areas need some fixes. So non-refundable payments. We understand you need to be secure, but we propose adding a clause that allows for refunds or credits if the services are not delivered as promised or are unusable due to LinkedIn's default. Great. And then termination, allowing client with reasonable notice period. Okay. All right. So let's take the next step. All right. Now I want you all to do in the teardown fashion. When we look at this non-refund provision, which again was section 1.2. I want you all, I'm going to give 30 seconds on a timer, and I want you to make a note. What are 3 ways that you could make this more friendly to our client? Which again, we're going to assume our client is spending 7 figures on LinkedIn. So what are 3 ways we might do that? So I'm going to give you 20 seconds actually. So let me set that timer. And meanwhile, all right, let's give you 20 seconds. Let's see here. Again, here's the provision, and our exercise is what would you do to make this better for us? All right, 20 seconds is up. So what I would do, non-refundable unless it's LinkedIn's fault. Exactly. Unless, okay. So what would we do to make it more friendly to our customers? So let's ask AI if it's got some ideas. All right. Thank you. For the refunds provision, can you give us 3 alternative clauses that allow for pro rata refunds? Okay, let's take a look. Certainly, here they are. In the event of services are unavailable for a continuous period of more than 48 hours due to reasons attributable to LinkedIn, exactly, LinkedIn's fault, just like Irina said, customers shall be entitled to a pro rata refund. So this is LinkedIn is down, service interrupted, we get money back. Sounds reasonable. Pro rata refund for early termination. If we terminate early due to LinkedIn's failure to provide the services as warranted, then we get a pro rata refund. Or number 3, pro rata refund for noncompliance. In the event that LinkedIn consistently fails to meet any agreed upon service levels for a period of more than a calendar month, customers shall be entitled to pro rata refund. All right, so what do we think? Do we like these 3 options? What do you think, Alexandra? Give us your commercial contracting lawyer perspective. Are these 3 reasonable fallbacks? Any you like better? Any you didn't think of?
No, I really like these. And I think one of the things that I might add in there is like, please draft these 3 as proposals to LinkedIn. And depending on sort of what the temperature is of the negotiations with LinkedIn, I might tell GCAI, please draft those in a warm, cordial, collaborative tone, or depending on again, how much leverage I have over LinkedIn, I might say, please draft these professionally, firmly, but still cordially, depending on how nuanced I want to get with my communication with LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly. So what's cool about this is that, you know, as folks over at Law Insider, you know, like the putting the contract together, that's like the higher order bit. And then there's like all these other things that we do as lawyers to get the contract from kind of like the piece of paper that we're focused on, the piece of code, through to, you know, let's use an engineering example, through to deployed out, getting it into people's hands, getting the agreement made. And so very similar, the way that engineers can use AI, we as lawyers and kind of contracts types can do the same. So I love that. All right, so that's where you get the good stuff, by the way, is continuing that chat. All right, so then let's take a look. So that was the refund provision. We had some good ideas in the chat. You know, 20 seconds is probably too fast. Vikshan asked which model we're using. We're using both GPT-4o and Claude 3.5 Sonnet, depending on the use case. So we actually use the better one for the job. So you're getting kind of the best mix of both, plus a whole bunch of stuff in software to get the exact quotes and scrape the web and do other stuff. All right, so we talked about non-refundable payments. All right, let's go to a fun one. And this one, we're going to be even more interactive. We're going to do limitation of liability, and we're going to ask folks to rewrite that. So let's take a look. I know Alexandra is just getting so excited, which is like making me super happy. So let's actually look at, give a specific example here to the AI. Okay, so please identify in the below contract the limitation of liability provision and tell me if it's market and if it's friendly to the customer, which is my company. All right, so a couple things I'm doing from an AI prompting standpoint here. I'm giving it the contract that I want. You should always do that. And then I'm being really specific. I'm like, hey, this is for my company. I want to look at LOL. I want to know if it's market, and I want your explanation. And tell me in 3 to 5 sentences. Okay. By the way, if you give the AI a number or a target to hit, it will tend to do better. Let's take a look. Okay, the limitation of liability provision is in Section 8 of the LSA. So let's go to Section 8 ourselves and see how it is. Liability cap. All right, Alexandra, give us the professional verdict on this one.
Again, if I'm spending any amount of significant funds on LinkedIn, I don't love that the liability cap is basically your fees paid.
When people say like 1x or 3x or 5x cap, what do they mean, and how do you come across that in your work?
So when you run into a provision like this, what this means is 1x fees, i.e. like, whatever it is that's laid out in here, you're basically limited to the amount of fees that you've paid. What you see a lot of people try to do is to try to say, okay, I know that asking for unlimited indemnification really isn't market anymore. So I'm going to try to come up with a number that I think the other side is going to agree to that makes sense. And that's where you get into this. All right, well, can we get more than just the value of the contract as our limitation of liability? Can we get 2 times the amount that the contract is worth? Can we get 3 times? And then from there, you'll see people say, okay, for just regular plain vanilla things, I'm willing to accept that it's limited to the value of the contract, but I want for certain problems to be worth more, right? I may want for my IP indemnity to be 3 times the value of the contract. I may want my, any breaches of data to be 4 times the value of the contract.
Got it. Okay. So kind of like tiering stuff and kind of really trying to adjust what's going on in the contract with like the reality of what you're doing as well. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're going to do that. So we're going to assume again in our example that we have an absolute large amount of leverage, that we are spending 7, 8 figures on LinkedIn, and we can negotiate this. So what are folks saying? It depends on the customer's risk. Yeah, exactly. Irina with a second win today. Good job. By the way, Irina's the one to beat in the chat here, in terms of like thinking about this provision. So let's take a look at this, and let's actually give a little bit more time. And I want folks to rewrite this provision how they, in a way that would be more friendly to the customers. Exclusions are also not terrible. Okay, yeah, you know what? A good point. The limitation of liability stated in section 8.1 and 2 do not apply to. Oh, break this down for us, Alexandra. What's going on here?
So what we know is that there are certain things that you by law cannot cap, right? So we know that you can't cap fraud, gross negligence, intentional misconduct. Thank you, LinkedIn, for putting in your contract what we're actually already entitled to by law. We also know that you can't cap for death or personal injury. Now, the nice thing about this provision from them is that they've also given you unlimited on IP rights. Now, keep in mind, this cuts both ways, right? Because it's either LinkedIn's violation of your company's IP rights, or it's also your company's violation of LinkedIn's IP rights.
Got it. Okay.
And then the last piece of it is, of course,
this last one, E. Would you say this is market? I mean, Annika thinks it's not terrible. Annika thinks it's pretty good. Would you agree? And also, looks like Irina's company does the same thing, except gross negligence and criminal fault. So what do we think of that E section? The personal data breaches that result from negligence, misconduct, or material failure to comply with the DPA. What do we think of that?
I mean, of course, like I would love for it to not have all of those, all that wiggle room, right? Like I would love for it to say like any personal data breaches that are the fault of LinkedIn, period. I don't love that it has to fall into one of these 3 buckets, but I do think that it is a commercially reasonable position for LinkedIn to take, that like, hey, if it's a personal data breach that happens from us committing negligence, us actually doing something on purpose, or us materially failing to comply with the terms of the data protection agreement, I think that's fair.
Okay, well, you're a very pragmatic lawyer, which makes sense given your experience. But what the heck? We're gonna use AI and we're gonna be aggressive as get out. So let's try that. Let's actually try and rewrite this, and let's get the help from AI. So let's see. So we had asked the AI. And when we last left our hero, we had asked the AI saying, what's going on with the limitation of liability cap? It's got a damages waiver and a liability cap. And oh my gosh, look, this provision is fairly standard, offering a balance protecting LinkedIn and the customer. It's somewhat friendly to the customer by excluding certain types of damages and by not setting the cap too low, although I disagree with that. However, the exclusion of direct and consequential is a common clause that might not be seen as customer friendly, flagging the issue. could limit recovery, exclusion of consequential damages might not protect. Okay, so let's ask that question that we saw in the chat. What about the exclusions from the LOL? Let's see what it does there. All right, so our intern is being very diligent and it's giving us the list of exclusions that we just went through, right? With the A through E or whatever it was. Does not apply to breach. Okay. All right, thank you. By the way, pro tip, you should be polite with your AI. It will be polite back. So AI has absorbed the whole internet. And so if you are polite with it, it will mirror you. And it will also kind of help it to understand we are in a professional setting now. All right, so thank you. So I'm going to thank the AI and I'm going to say, can you give me, so here's what I'm going to do. I want you all to pick a provision of the LSA and rewrite it using AI if you can. So I'm going to show you us doing it here, and then we can do it for another thing. But first, let me finish what I was doing, and then we'll do the exercise. Can you give me a rewrite of all, give me 3 rewrites of all of section 8. Section 8, correct? Yeah. All of section 8 that are more friendly to the customer. Please explain what the rewrite is and why you recommend it. All right, now, something here on the point about AI being overeager. I am telling it to be aggressive. Even though we've got a commercial contracting expert here, I'm actually going against the expert, being like, no, I want aggression here. So let me explain. And I'm gonna actually say, my company spends, 35 million a year on LinkedIn. So we have a lot of leverage. All right. On LinkedIn, let's just throw in, and we plan to keep working with them for 3 years. Okay. So let's see how the AI does. And I think it's going to help us be faster. Annika, thank you. Thanks for joining.
Meanwhile, it's doing its thing. One of the things I was just going to say, Cecilia, that I really like about GCAI is that not only will it like give you alternatives to write, you can then also in your next prompt turn around and say, okay, now please draft me a communication to LinkedIn providing all of these. So I think it's nice that like not only can you get the actual work, you can also get the communication kind of work as well.
Exactly. Oh, Abdul's got us. This is common but could limit the customer's ability to claim compensation. Okay, yeah. Let's see. All right, so let's see. So we've got three different rewrites here. So it looks like it went through what we wanted. Look at this. Yay. What did it do? It increased the liability cap. That's a good one. So that we were talking about that 3x. And how is it doing that? It's saying subject to 8.3, neither party. Oh gosh, look, it changed 3 times. That was a very simple rewrite. By the way, Alexandra, in terms of contracting, tell us about how surgical or not you are with edits. Like, do you, is it better to like strike a whole provision? Is it better to do what this has done? What's your view on that?
Surgical is always going to be better. I think, in particular, when you're on the receiving end of it, seeing a couple tweaks here and there, you sort of interpret that as like, oh, this person has tried to work with my language. They're trying to work with me. When you see people take out entire pieces of the agreement, you sort of steel yourself for, oh my goodness, this is going to be a difficult contract negotiation because they've just completely redlined the bejesus out of my agreement.
Got it. All right. Would people agree in the chat? Would people agree with Alexandra? I certainly wholeheartedly do. But is it better to be surgical or better to be more whole cloth? Yeah, we got strong agreement. Thank you, Stacy. Fellow Z name, which I appreciate. All right. So I am actually leaning towards option 1, the increase the liability cap. Devin's agreeing with us, obeyed. All right. All right. So inclusion of consequential damages. Okay. All right. So they're going to rewrite and say, allows recovery of consequential damages if they are the direct result of breach. This is more customer friendly, as acknowledges some breaches may cause downstream effects that affect the customer's business. So consequential damages in LinkedIn, I would probably have a hard time trying to think exactly what that is. Maybe they lost out on a great candidate. That could be it. Is that a consequential damage or a direct damage? I don't actually know. Maybe I see AI. What do you think? LinkedIn's down. I lose, God's gift to commercial contracting because my commercial counsel role goes unfilled. Is that a direct damage or a consequential damage? What do we think? Alexandra, do you know? Anybody know in the chat?
I would not say that that's a direct damage. I would say that's a consequential damage.
All right, that are direct results. So this is a little bit confusing. So maybe AI here was a little confused on the law or would need a little bit of human help. All right, so then we've got the exclusions, which is where I think a lot of folks went. And it's basically changing it to the original said any personal data breaches that result from LinkedIn's negligence, intentional conduct, or material failure to comply with the GPA. And it's saying any personal data breaches, period. So it did exactly what Alexandra said. Look at that. Wow. We have got human plus AI reaching the pinnacle, which was, I think, like one of the main themes of this webinar. So I'm like, we should just like stop here while we're ahead, but we're not going to. We're going to give you the chance to do it. So here's the assignment. You are going to take the LinkedIn LSA and using your AI of choice, it can be GCAI. You can drop that here in the chat. It's you can sign up here at gc.ai/law insider. And the task is going to be, you're going to take 3 minutes. We're going to ride the bike and 2 minutes. We're going to set a timer for 2 minutes. And you are going to rewrite a provision in here in the LinkedIn contract that you don't like. Now, remember, it can be anything. We had that whole list, right? Maybe we want to do data protection. Maybe we want to do IP rights, termination. But your task is have AI help with your commercial contracting task. So I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. There will be a prize. I will give 3 free months of GCAI to the person on this chat, so not in the video later, but to the person that comes up with the best rewrite. And you can drop your chats in here. All right, so let me play the timer real quick. 2 minutes starting now. Okay, 2 minutes are up. All right, I think Abdul dropped a thing, damages waiver. LinkedIn will be liable for indirect, incidental, consequential, special damages, including but not limited to lost profits. If such damages result from LinkedIn's breach of the agreement, negligence, or failure to provide the services outlined in the agreement. Lindsay also acknowledges the customer has the right to seek compensation for any amount of damages that and the amount of fees paid that exceed the amount of fees paid. Wow. So this is basically just a complete gutting of the limitation of liability. I love it. Abdul, that might be the winner. All right. So let's take a look. Alexandra, snap. Exactly. That's exactly the reaction I had. All right. So scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is fire this intern immediately, and 10 is give this intern a official moniker of commercial contracting expert. What how did people do? It looks like Abdul got, maybe I would give that intern an 8 because it's also kind of like a little too sly, but how did people do? Did anybody try it with AI? All right, drop it in the chat or in the questions. But the core idea is that having the ability to take a contract and get AI to help you rewrite, especially if you know what you're doing. I couldn't connect in due time. All right, Irina, I will send you an email if you email me. It's Cecilia, spelled like Cecilia at getgc.ai, or contact@getgc.ai. Reach out and we will figure out how to get you set up. But okay, so then let's see. So what else we got? So basically, oh shoot. All right. Well, sometimes I think we probably could have checked like the international thing for that. But wanted to give you some more use cases for AI, and then we can jump into questions. So AI can be your assistant, make your emails more collaborative. If you're emailing about contracts particularly, summarize notes from a conference, notes from this webinar, compile CLE materials. It can be a creative partner, right? So I've trained a lot of teams on commercial contracting, or a lot of teams on privacy, how to write a TPA. Let's do that as a quick example. Let's try that just to show you how I can do that. You can say something like, and this will work in ChatGPT as well. You can say, I need to make a training on the basics of data processing addendums and why we need them as a global, need them with our partners, e-commerce company. Please give me an outline for a 10-slide prezzo.
I mean, while it's doing its thing, you can definitely use this. I will say that like my favorite thing to do when I'm doing trainings for companies is to theme it. So what I will do, and I've done this with GCAI, is I will say like, give me a presentation that is about NDAs that is themed like Willy Wonka, and it actually does a really good job at doing that. So I really encourage all of you, when it comes to your trainings that you're giving for your companies, really think about playing around with themes, because all of these people have probably sat through a very boring legal training before, and you want it to be memorable so you don't have to do it over and over and over again.
Awesome. So let's try this real time. I have never tried a Willy Wonka data processing addendum, but let's see. Absolutely. Let's add a sprinkle of Willy Wonka magic to your prezzo. Welcome to the data processing factory, unlocking the secrets of data processing addendums. So I'm your chief data confectioner. Oh my God, this is like so cheesy. I'm even like out cheesing myself. I love it. I got a smile out of Mike, which also is achievement unlocked for the day. All right, from bean to bar, data's life cycle. Oh my God, this is fire, Alexandra. I just love this. The sweetest currency is trust. I agree with that. Cautionary tales from the chocolate factory. Okay, this is epic. Like this is actually really, really good. Recap of the sweetest points, initiatives for wholesome DPAs. Handling blueberries. Oh my gosh, we've got, what is it, Viola? What was that woman's name? The one that turned into a blueberry. Do you remember?
Veruca Salt.
Veruca Salt, yes, and there was like a 90s band too, wasn't it? All right, that's probably why I know it. I love it.
No, it was Violet Beauregard, because remember, Violet, you're turning.
Oh yeah, Veruca was the other girl. Yeah,
Violet
Veruca was
Beauregard
the other girl.
The win. I'm wanting to give Jennifer a free month of GCAI just for that. That was awesome. Yeah,
good job, Jennifer.
All right, good job. Yeah, and I mean, excellent. All right, so that's one you can do. Other fun stuff, you know, it can be a so we talked about it as a junior lawyer, right? So AI can actually, you know, it can take new regulation and law firm blast. So this is one of my favorite things. I want to show you guys this feature, or this thing you can do with AI, is you can actually, we've got this prompt library over here. So if you get, you know, how many of you ever get law firm client alerts? Yeah, that's me, everybody, every day, right? So you take one of your client alerts and you actually ask the AI for action items, right? So like the Rhode Island Data Privacy Act came out. Let me show you what that looks like. And it actually, we got this amazing alert from Lexology about it. And it says, you know, the Rhode Island joins the group of other states with data privacy laws, June 28th, the Rhode Island Data Protection and Privacy Act. We've got this great article, confession. It's a little bit long for me. So what I'm going to do is actually say, hey, review this client alert. Give me the key takeaways. Does it apply to my company? Give me action items. And it's going to actually physically read that article. So you give it that and it'll read the article for you. So this is like AI is your junior, or, you know, if you're in Canada, it's your articling student, or, you know, I think you guys have, you know, your junior solicitorship and so on and abroad. But anyways, it is your apprentice. It actually read that article for you. And it's going to give you whether it applies. It's going to help you document things. So it can definitely do more. Like that's my other thing too, is like ride the bike with Legal AI and have the realization of how much it can really do for you. Like my challenge to you all is to get out and spend 5 minutes a day using AI. I know you're spending more than that on, you know, on Law Insider. Pull some contracts from Law Insider, have AI help you tweak them, have AI help you pick which clause you want, have it read stuff for you, have it compare a really good Law Insider template against yours. You can say, hey, AI, here's a template that I'm planning to use. Here's my existing contract. Give me a list of how they differ in aggressiveness. So all kinds of stuff you can do. You can update a policy. The Willy Wonka example will never, that's going to live rent-free in my brain forever. Thank you. And so hopefully it does the same for you all. You can iterate on clauses as we did, right? That's exactly the exercise we did. And I think the winner, I think we've decided is Abdul, or perhaps Bright. And then give AI specific provisions. You can do, I mean, it's just like unlimited amount of fun stuff. In the deck that you guys are going to get, you're going to see examples. We did an update to an employee handbook. We did options for entering India. If you do some regulatory work in your practice, you know, maybe you're trying to create an entity, whatever it is, you'll get advice on that. So awesome. So we got a couple minutes left. Mike, were there questions in the chat that we should dive into, or anything else we should work on?
I don't see those. I'm going to ask a meta question real quick because we just got a couple minutes. So you have to answer a big question in a short amount of time. I saw on Twitter the other day, somebody said, so let me get this straight. I was promised a robot that would take away all the dumb dishes and stuff that I don't want to do. And then all I'd be doing is big mind work. And instead, what I got was something that does a bunch of big mind work. And now all I have left is the dishes and the, like, how did this happen? And I think in legal, there's this question of a lot of legal professionals that I think, whether subconsciously or consciously, is making them resist learning AI, which is, okay, what do I tell my boss I do after this? Just quickly, what's your view? Let's assume this stuff works. It becomes efficient. It becomes effective. And now it takes us a fraction of the time to do stuff that we used to put on a spreadsheet and take all day. What are we doing? What are we doing in 5 years? What are legal professionals doing in 5 years?
Yeah, so a couple things. So one is with AI, my view is the level of the entire profession will go up. So you can see it's like basketball, right? It's an adversarial system. You know, even in your civil law countries or what have you, litigation, you have two parties. And so if your opponent is using AI, you're going to use AI and you're going to play better. So think about like in the 80s, you know, before Michael Jordan started lifting weights, basketball players were kind of scrawny. And then Michael Jordan's coach comes along and now basketball players are bulky. The game is more aggressive. The game is faster. So I see that happening. That's answer number one. Answer number two is like, yeah, you know, I don't like washing dishes either. And I also personally don't like reviewing NDAs, right? Like NDAs is like the lowest hanging fruit. And, you know, even one of the earliest AIs, it was machine learning. Like when I was a pretty junior lawyer 10 years ago, there was some AI that was very specifically trained to NDAs. And somebody asked me like, hey, like, oh my gosh, are you going to use your job? You're not going to review NDAs. I'm like, I don't like reviewing NDAs now. Like, I like the fun stuff, the negotiation where you're working on exclusivity provision and you do 3 turns with the other side, because how you're going to enter this market and how you're going to make money with your company is like the main issue. That's the fun part. And by the way, the fun part is also what Alexandra said. Like, she wove in so much knowledge around like the business and making things happen. And then my third point on that is like, I have never, like, even when I was in private practice and especially in-house, I've never really felt like I had too much resources. I have always had a month of Mondays worth of tasks. Okay, so maybe you spend a little bit less reviewing LinkedIn's agreement. Then what if you take that and you do better on your training? Or what if you take that and then your business wants to launch some new product and you do an insane, amazing regulatory review that's ready before they've even launched? You know, so like there is always, if you think of your job as, okay, I only review provisions, I could see that apprehension. But if you think of your job as I advance the business and my job is to zealously represent my stakeholders and my clients, if you reframe it in that way, the sky is limitless. Or take that extra time and write on LinkedIn, become an influencer. Take that extra time, go to CLEs, take it and network and do good things for your company and yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so like I reject the premise that it's going to take our jobs, because I do think it will transform our jobs where it's expert plus AI, but the ability to prompt, right? So lawyers who know how to prompt 30% higher salaries, folks. So like, I'm not just trying to sell something, I'm actually doing something that, you know, if you learn how to use this, it's like learning how to use PowerPoint or something. If your colleagues don't know, you suddenly have that extra value from that. So that's my answer to that, Mike. Other thoughts? Who's
No,
hiring? That tough question from Natalie with a tough question. I think personally, lawyers that know AI are not having a hard time getting jobs, is my experience. Yeah, Mike. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I've got questions in the Q&A specifically about GCAI, but we got to wrap. So let me ask you to take that as a prompt for people who want to learn more about GCAI. What's the right way to reach out to you? I would also say for people who want to go connect with Alexandra on LinkedIn, Alexandra, if you could drop your profile in the chat, that would be great. I've had conversations that will remain private between me and Alexandra that make me laugh. So I will send you guys there. Cecilia, for people who want to learn about GCAI, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so we do a trial. Lawyers are no nonsense and you should use the product. So go to getgc.ai/law insider and you can sign up. And when you do, you'll see a slightly embarrassing demo video of me, but guess what? You've seen me for an hour, so I guess it's not that embarrassing. But anyways, watch the demo video and you will get a trial and you'll get prompting tips every day for 2 weeks. I also teach an AI prompting class. This is a much deeper version of what we did with more interaction. I'll critique your prompts, but it really is, the core message is it's like riding a bike. We're like, get out there and work on it. I think GCAI is a better AI. It does a bunch of stuff. You know, we didn't get into features. If you have to use ChatGPT, you can. It will hallucinate significantly more. And it will have those data privacy issues that I think Natalie and other folks asked about. We're very careful about that because we're a paid product, but try it for 2 weeks. At the end of those 2 weeks, if you're like, hey, oh my gosh, I really need a little bit more time. You know, we have a Slack community. We're engaged similar to Law Insider, so do that. But I might encourage, as a first step, I might encourage taking the class or doing the trial.
Perfect. All right. Thank you all. The link again is over in the chat. Grab that real quick. We're going to wrap. We'll see you at the next webinar. Remember, we're going to send you the recording, the links, the where to go to next, contact information. So that'll all come to you in your email. Thank you all again. Thanks, Cecilia and Alexandra. We'll see everybody next time.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Dory. Thank you, David, Natalie, everybody in the chat. Alexandra is fabulous. Have a great day. Bye, everyone. And a good weekend. See ya.